the harvest. Have you ever seen in your travels how in ancient times, we're talking about the Middle Ages, the time of the Great Plague, 1347, around there, death was centre stage. Life was short and fragile. It devastated Europe. But it left its trace also. It is said, actually, this is a small parenthesis for you children, that a ring of roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down, could come as far back as there, because in nursery rhymes we're talking about jumps of 50 years at a time, because Granny teaches a second generation, a third generation, and on it goes, and it could well go back to that. They have these things appearing on their cheeks, they used to cough, splutter, and fall down dead, like flies. I close that parenthesis, but it's something which also can be seen in places left. Macabre dances chiselled on walls, that kind of thing. Images of kings, that is a skeleton of a king with a crown, a bishop, a skeleton of a bishop, hand in hand dancing with the pauper. Death, the great equalizer, from which no man can escape. And there he goes with nothing at all but the baggage he carries in his soul, and no pockets in a shroud, and no university degree can make it better or worse, only the merit of the soul. Whether or not it's washed in the precious blood of Jesus, whether or not it has lived in grace or not, all the rest is gone. Now, with regard then to the words of the Master, he is warning us that these are all around us. We're in the midst of an ongoing process, and we're next to people all the time who might not be on the way home, who might not be ignited, who might not be in a state of divine grace. And if they die at that point, they're in serious trouble. So we have to handle our situation in life. It's not perfect. But in the first reading we have some tips, and I'd like to look at some of these tips. St. Paul is giving recommendations, indeed a whole program of life, of the consequences of being precisely on the right side. First of all, there is an ambit in which we live. Let the peace of Christ, shalom, that's have sway over. The original is difficult to translate. It's let it be almighty on everything in you, rule over your hearts. So the bottom line is peace. Now we can ask ourselves right now, am I in peace? I will at the end quote something to you from a mystic who I believe is still alive, Catalina, who was shown something of what matters when it comes to meeting the King of Peace at the altar. And she was shown this, for instance, that people are coming up into church out of breath, not receptive, because they're in hyped up mode and have not had the time to make that pause of no man's land between what's out there and what's in there. They're not good terrain, just in time to be late. And there also she was shown at the beginning, in the moment of penitential examination of conscience, that although she thought she was okay, she was shown actually there were a few things that were not okay. Not mortal sins, but serious enough to make it difficult at that point for her to be crystal clear. For instance, she'd been somewhat rude on the road, and so on. Little things which we allow to pass. But coming to church to meet the Lord of Glory are rendering us not entirely peaceful. There's a blockage. The Lord loves peaceful souls. Now remember that before getting into our argument. If peace is paramount, you will not get into heated debates. You will solve it in some other way. Think on these things before exploding or in any way taking away that peace which should reign even around you. You're a peaceful cloud wherever you go. But he goes on. This one, gratitude. He wants, with heartfelt gratitude, that we should sing to God psalms, hymns, and inspired songs. Now, gratitude is a mode. We can go through life presuming that we have rights. You see it actually in a child. A child in his early days is full of surprises. It's all new. He's discovering the gift of life. His eyes are opening and everything is interesting. Eventually, the terrible twos, the toddlers, get their own rights and they demand them. They have their own capacity to command and they will use them. And eventually they start grumbling if it doesn't obey their wish. They start to be ungrateful. Goes on. The big ungrateful adolescent who knows it all. What did daddy and mammy know? Not a clue. And on it goes. And the big child remains a big child in marriage. All for me, and I think take things for granted. But it applies also unto him. Now I want to quote here this. I believe this mystic, Catalina, lives in Colombia. But this, you might get your hand on it, it's just the Holy Mass, but it goes to an experience that she had during a celebration in which the Lord opened her eyes and her ears. And it's quite sobering. What she saw and what she heard is going on, even right now, as we sit and wait for the Lord's coming. Listen to this. I go to the last part because it's the bit that handles this issue of gratitude. The people began to leave their pews in procession for Holy Communion. The great moment of the much-awaited encounter had arrived. The Lord said to me, "Wait a moment, I want you to observe something." An interior impulse made me raise my eyes towards the person who was going to receive communion on the tongue from the hands of the priest. I should clarify that this person was one of the ladies from our group who the previous night was unable to go to confession, but this morning was able to do so before Mass. And the priest placed the sacred host on her tongue, a flash of light, like a very golden white light, went right through this person. Now remember that. Went right through this person. When you're receiving Holy Communion, you're in contact with the living God, and there are energies at work that you can't possibly imagine. Now, do you think that there is time and space there for distraction or hurry, and for an impure soul to boot? So listen. First through her back, then surrounding her from the back, around her shoulders, and then her head. The Lord said, "This is how I myself rejoice in embracing a soul who comes with a clean heart to receive me." The tone of Jesus' voice was that of a happy person. I was astonished to see my friend return to her pew, surrounded by light, embraced by the Lord. I thought of the marvel that we miss so many times by going to receive Jesus with our small or large offences when it should actually be a feast. She goes on to this problem that the difficulty of going to confession is there, priests are unavailable or whatever it might be, but she goes into this one, which is also something that perhaps is worth looking into. Rather, she says, the problem resides in the ease with which we fall into evil again. Now, there is a B-side to our practice of confession. It's the mentality, "Oh, I'll confess it next time. Oh, I'll go to confession. Therefore, I'll sin." Well, it's completely topsy-turvy, because it has no sense to be, at that moment, switched off from the one that we love. as in a good marriage, you go against the known wish of your spouse, you damage the intimacy, because your will is not wed. On the other hand, in the same way that women make an effort to locate a beauty parlour, or men seek the services of a hairdresser when we have to attend a party, we have to also make a conscious effort to seek out a priest when we need to remove all that dirt from ourselves. We must not have the audacity to receive Jesus with our hearts full of filth. When I was about to receive communion, Jesus said to me, the Last Supper was the moment of the greatest intimacy with my own. During that hour of love, I established what could be thought of as the greatest act of lunacy in the eyes of men, that of making myself a prisoner of love. I established the Eucharist. I wanted to remain with you until the end of the centuries, because my love could not bear that you remained orphans, you whom I loved more than my life. She goes on to the experience of her own communion at that point. I'll skip that. I'll come to this point here, which concerns us all. Listen. When I returned to my seat, while kneeling down, the Lord said, listen. A moment later, I began to hear, it's extraordinary, I began to hear the prayers of the lady who was seated in front of me, who had just received communion. What she said, without opening her mouth, was more or less like this. Lord, remember that we are at the end of the month. I do not have the money to pay the house rent, the car rentals, or the children's school fees. You have to do something to help me. Please, make my husband stop drinking so much. I cannot bear it anymore, his being intoxicated so often. And my youngest son is going to repeat the year again if you don't help him. He has his exams this week. And do not forget our neighbour who must move. Let her do it right away. I cannot stand it anymore. And on it goes. And the Lord goes on to explain that that's what he gets over many a communion over the Catholic globe. These are her words, that is the words that the Lord gives her to hear. Did you take note of her prayer? Not a single time did she tell me that she loves me. Not once did she thank me for the gift I have given her by bringing down my divinity to the level of her poor humanity, or to elevate her to my godly status. Not a single time has she said, thank you, Lord. It's been a litany of requests. And so are almost all of those who come to receive me. Is it our case, if we're honest? And since we're into intimacy, remember that as between spouses, true intimacy is wordless, so it is with the Lord of love himself. He loves stillness and peace and an attitude of thank you, thank you, thank you. Praise you, praise you, praise you. The grunt is displeasing even to our God. I just concluded one other point linked with all this. Peace cannot be protected if we're too thinly spread. We don't have to spend our short innings on earth doing everything possible. And so calculate, what do you have to do? Don't go to everything possible, even everything wholly possible. It agitates you. The way to relativize things is, for instance, to pause in a graveyard now and again. There one sees what mattered and what mattered less. And should I die now, what would be my regrets? Anticipate your death now and again. I happen to notice just in the graveyard very close to my hermitage, because the hermitage is in the grounds of the old abbey, and there's there an old graveyard, still being used actually. And it had on one of the tombs this: death is not extinguishing the light, it is putting out the lamp, because the dawn has come. And it hit me as I thought about that, how when we lose somebody, there is, as it were, a tremor in the air. That person now can see what I can't see. The crossing has been made, the discovery also. Just yesterday I was talking to a lady who must be into her 90s, and she thought she had been on the point of death. She was alone, and she felt her heart in terrible pain, chest pain. Oh, I'm going, this is it, I can feel it coming. She clasped her crucifix and her rosary. If I must die on my own, so be it. And she started to pray and get ready for the Lord to come. She was ready. About 3 years ago, somebody half her age, in her 40s, who had helped quite a lot, who used to come here actually. She was not well, I knew that. We had been, as it happened, not long before then, at the cemetery, no, not the cemetery, the crematorium in Dublin, Mount Joan, at the entrance there. And little did I think, that day there was a ring at the door, and the Gardaí came. Is it true that you know something about Siobhan Corrigan? Yes. Who is her next of kin? We've just found her dead. And so, a few days later, we were there carrying her to that same crematorium. And it hit me. The Lord can come at any time. The heart can stop at any moment, not of our choosing. Think of these things, my friends. The only safe way to live is with the eyes already on eternity, and as though this were the only day we had.